Well, good evening and welcome to this night's KMUD Garble Ask Your Herb Doctor, third Friday of this month, July the 18th, 2025. Welcome to the show. My name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray.
Okay, so you're listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor, KMUD Garble 91.1 FM and on the web at www.kmud.org. We're live streaming the show to our Western Botanical Medicine YouTube channel. So you can listen live right now on our channel by searching Western Botanical Medicine in the search bar on YouTube, or click on the live stream. So tonight's radio show is a continuation of last month's June 2025 show, which was on forever chemicals. So we're going to round up the end of that show, cover some of those last details about forever chemicals, and then I want to break into the kind of broader subject of endocrine disrupting chemicals and specific relation this time for the guys out there that are interested in testosterone and all the deficiencies that come with low testosterone in males. Undoubtedly, I think females have much more interest in nurturing and caring and taking care of, and I probably see twice as many females in practice as I do males, and I think that's just the nature of the way things are with taking care of yourself. But I think certainly there has been an increase in the information about endocrine disrupting chemicals, and males are definitely as at risk, and so for those conditions like gynecomastia, low libido, infertility, and other issues surrounding low anabolic energy in the body. And obviously Dr. Pete has a very different perspective on it, and so as we did all of our programs with him from 2007 until he died in 22. Yeah. Okay, so he essentially changed our viewpoint from when we were studying herbal medicine in England, with the same dogma, the same doctrine, the medical association and doctors and pharmacologists had all been trained in the regular scientific appreciation, if you like, of the way things were, but he certainly showed us a different side of that. So we're going to cover that in relation to things like DHT and testosterone and aromatization of testosterone into estrogen, and how with all of the assaults that we put up with in our environment, whether it's from the water, from the air, the food, and then endocrine disrupting chemicals are all part of that, and how males can certainly suffer from this kind of onslaught. So it's not just the females that are affected with things like PCOS and all of the hormone dependent cancers, estrogen mediated or triggered by, but basically going to wrap up last month's discussion on forever chemicals and then get into the kind of endocrine side of disrupting chemicals and male hormones, and specifically with herbs that I'm going to mention that are specifically targeting those systems and how they work. Okay, so Dr. Pete died November 22nd, 22, so Thanksgiving Day 2022. Okay, so let's just get straight into the end of last month then. All right, so what I should say first of all, though, is that basically last month we were talking about forever chemicals and PFAS, which were the per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. So that is both perfluorooctanoic acid and perfluorooctane sulfonic acid. Anyway, so those basically PFAS is the acronym for it. So I'm not going to go into the chemical name for it every time I talk about them. But anyway, they're basically synthetic organofluorine chemical compounds that have multiple fluorine atoms attached to an alkyl chain, and there's about 7 million known. That's not how many have actually been synthesized and used commercially, but there are about 7 million that are known. If you do a database search for it, the possible number is about 7 million. Anyway, about 15,000 have actually been manufactured. Essentially came into being with the accidental discovery of Teflon in 1938. These fluoropolymer coatings were used essentially created to try and resist heat and oil. They've also turned into things that kind of counter stains and prevent grease from contaminating material. And they're basically used in many different things, from waterproofing fabrics such as nylon, yoga pants, carpets. It's very used in shampoos, in feminine hygiene products, for crying out loud. Mobile phone screens make use of these, wall paint, furniture adhesive, food packaging, firefighting foam, and the list goes on. So these forever chemicals, then they're so cool because they can take up to 100 years to degrade in the environment. They've been used in a variety of consumer and commercial applications since Teflon was discovered, and not discovered, accidentally stumbled on, I guess, in 1938. And yeah, the main reason that they are looked into was for their ability to repel water, oil, resist high temperature, and act as a surfactant by helping different types of liquids mix. So, like I said, there's about 15,000 different PFAS chemicals. Each one's got a slightly different chemical composition, but they all have at least 2 carbon fluorine bonds, which makes them a PFAS. Okay, so to wrap up then, last month, I got to the point of describing things like firefighting foam, which have been shown to contaminate thousands of acres of land, government land as well as public land. These PFAS chemicals are used in firefighting foam, and I wanted just to move on. I discussed it last month, so if you guys are listening now want to have a listen to the June show, just click on that and kind of cover extensively what these PFASs are, how they were produced, what they turn up in, and what can be done to try and rid yourself of these things, or at least limit your exposure. Knowledge being the first step towards being able to do something about it. Okay. So we talked about the endocrine disrupting nature of these PFAS chemicals. So estrogen dominance has been something that we've talked about fairly extensively, and especially when Dr. Pete was alive and we were doing all these different radio shows on different topics. The whole point of estrogen dominance came up time and time again. And as I said at the beginning, the kind of standard medical textbook descriptions and the references to estrogen are relatively positive. They don't really talk about it being a cancer promoter, a promoter of rapid cell division, and an inflammatory chemical that just creates boggy tissues and low cell energy, and ultimately the kind of prevailing cancers that come as a result of unopposed estrogen. But the whole point of estrogen dominance, it's not just females, it can be males. I mean, we have estrogen as males. We don't have the same volume or the same cyclic, pattern of monthly estrogen spiking. Obviously, females have the progesterone counterpart to it for half of the month, which is why it's so important to maintain regular menstrual cycles, so that you don't have shortened cycles that would potentially offset your estrogen exposure, that you have an adequate 14-day progesterone exposure as well as your from day 0 to day 14 estrogen dominance. But basically, endocrine disrupting chemicals, things like phthalates, I know we have done specific shows in the past on phthalates. They're used in plastics, fragrances, and personal care products. And then bisphenol A. We've definitely talked about BPA in the past. I know California is certainly doing everything it can to rid these chemicals from our state. I know other states have not been so on the spot for this, but BPA is definitely found in some plastics and food containers, with the original source of contamination for people getting endocrine disrupting chemicals from plastics. And then pesticides, obviously, pesticides are a very good endocrine disruptor, and most people don't really recognize the entire problem with pesticides and herbicides that are specific chemicals that are endocrine disruptors. Things, obviously, DDT has been outlawed at this point in time, but atrazine is still used, and for agricultural and pest control. As I mentioned, flame retardants. Yeah, go ahead. Microbiome, yeah. All right, well, good. We'll take a look at that. Okay, so flame retardants, then things that are used in furniture, electronics, and other products. And incidentally, California have just finally outlawed some of the flame retardants that have been typically used for camping equipment, tents, and sleeping bags. And then the perfluorinated compounds, the PFCs, found in some food packaging and non-stick cookware. And then parabens, these are another class here, used as preservatives in cosmetics and personal care products. These are going to be things you're putting directly on your skin. They're going to be fat soluble, they're going to get straight into your circulation. Again, endocrine disrupting. And then the polychlorinated bisphenols, so the PCBs. Most people think about these for circuit boards, but industrial chemicals and the byproducts are sources of PCBs. And then most people have probably heard of dioxins. These are byproducts of industrial processes and incineration. So dioxins, so all of these things then are basically endocrine disrupting chemicals, and they're found in all of these different classes of industrial or commercial products. So they all cause reproductive problems, reduced fertility, birth defects, and other reproductive issues. They involved in developmental delays, they affect brain development and cognitive function. As their name lends, they are responsible for hormonal imbalances. They disrupt the production and regulation of hormones, potentially leading to various health problems. They certainly increase the risk of certain cancers, and some endocrine disrupting chemicals are linked to an increased risk of breast, prostate, and other cancers. And then again, with endocrine disruption comes immune system dysfunction and dysregulation. These endocrine disrupting chemicals can interfere with the proper functioning of the immune system. And then metabolic disorders. So endocrine disrupting chemicals have been linked to obesity, diabetes, and other metabolic issues, essentially disrupting energy flow through the body and disrupting enzymatic processes and cell repair, tissue regeneration, healing, etc. And again, a lot of this, again, would be something that would be due to estrogen and the action of these chemicals on triggering estrogen production, whether it's through wounding, trauma, inflammation. All of these things will trigger estrogen production, and estrogen production has by its own feedback an effect on inflammation and water retention and boggy cells and poor energy flow. So that's estrogen, but let's take a quick look here, and I'll just outline some of these herbs, but we'll start looking at testosterone support in males. And I'm sorry that the initial title of the show here was the Forever Chemicals. We're kind of done with it. I will go back and reference some of it during the rest of the 45 minutes here of the show, but the bulk of this show at this point in time is going to be looking at testosterone support in males and some of that bad science that most people are taught when they're studying either herbal medicine or naturopathy. They're still taught some of this erroneous information about estrogen and testosterone in relation to DHT and prostate health, infertility, low sex drive, etc., etc. So we'll bring out the kind of the science behind it, but not the science that you typically are told and how it's regurgitated in the mainstream. So just to quickly talk about some of these herbs, I'll just give the title of these before I break into a more kind of specific discourse about each individual product. So things like withania, which is ashwagandha, withania somniferum. Tribulus terrestris, which is otherwise known as puncture vine. Both the foliage and the seed, they have fairly different activities. Lepidium mayennii, which is maca, and then Zingiber officinalis, ginger, and then Eurycoma longifolia, otherwise known as Tonkat alley, and then Epimedium corianum, which is the horny goatweed, Paulinistilia, which is yohimbe bark, and essentially want to describe, infertility related to estrogen dominance or testosterone deficiency and low sperm count. So you're listening to Ask Your Herb Dr. KMUD Capital 91.1 FM, and from 7:30 till the end of the show, 8 o'clock, you're invited to call in with questions. The number 707-923-3911. My name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray. Welcome to July's Ask Your Herb Doctor show.
Okay, so let's just go through these herbs specifically and try and outline some of the mistakes that are made in the science and the literature and how Dr. Pete always explained it, and how we intend to continue in that vein, but describe the differences and hopefully enable people to make informed choices. Okay, and it can be, you can find it. It's not like it's buried. I know Dr. Pete always talked about the books and the research that was buried in libraries that was no longer accessible, and now, with the age of the internet, the vested interests in PubMed and other research places is all slanted towards what they want you to know and understand about diseases and the drugs that they manufacture to treat them, or at least maintain you in a perpetual state of barely making it. Anyway, so Tribulus terrestris. I came across this herb, I think 2009. There was a business in Albuquerque, New Mexico, called Resting in the River, and I just looked it up a little while ago, and I think the lady who bought it actually sold it now. But that was one of the very first places we ever sourced Tribulus terrestris as a certified organic product from their farm. And quite rightly so. The product's called puncture vine. It's well known and grown in India, I think because they ride lots of bikes in India, they probably come across this fact more than most people would. The fruits of it, the pericarp of this plant, is extremely sharp. They have like 4 or 5 needle-like points on these fruits, and it's a difficult product to handle because you've really got to wear good gloves when you handle this stuff. So it's like one of the nastiest products to work with unless it's a powder. But essentially, puncture vine, both the foliage and the fruits are used. So it's used in traditional and modern herbal medicines, but like I said, there's kind of different pharmacological effects between the leaves or the seeds are used. It is pretty significant, when you come to use these products for somebody with either low sex drive or promoting testosterone, kind of two separate pharmacological uses that we wanted to kind of open up here and make it a little more obvious of what path you would go down if you have patients that are dealing with either one of these. So the leaves, they both contain saponins, both the leaves and the fruits, but they're slightly different saponins. So the protodiacin saponins, camphorol and the flavonoids camphorol and protodiacin is different in the leaves than the furostanol saponins that are found in the fruits. Okay, so the leaves are used typically for androgen and testosterone enhancing activity, as well as kind of aphrodisiac and anabolic directly from their testosterone stimulation. Whereas the seeds and the fruits typically used for libido and erectile dysfunction, but there has also been used for things like UTIs. So the main mechanism by which the leaves are acting is enhancing luteinizing hormone and possibly DHEA, testosterone, as an anti-inflammatory antioxidant, whereas the fruits enhance nitric oxide and they mildly boost testosterone, but that's not their main activity with that particular furostanol saponin. But they do improve sperm parameters if you're looking at motility, viability, etc. with sperm and production, quantity. This is something that the seeds and the fruits would be better at stimulating, as opposed to the leaves that would be more for directly improving the ratio of testosterone and or DHEA. So I think the Bulgarians, I think I still have this product, and it was a tableted form of Tribulus, and it was made by a Bulgarian pharmaceutical company, and I still have it, and it's probably 18 years old now. And I didn't buy it because I don't think I had any testosterone deficiency. But I remember having them, and I just saw them, a few weeks ago, digging through the herbs and the different things that we had. Probably for one of the children needed something, and I came across these tablets, and I just thought I'd just pop one out of the foil packet, and it's still it still had a very prominent taste of tribulus. So, without getting into a discourse about expiry dates and the viability of different herbs and how long they last, it's really not at all the case that within a year or 2 or 3 years these things have no more activity. This particular tribulus product still tasted very active. So the protodiacin content of the leaves is regarded as a more potent libido and testosterone stimulating compound. Essentially, you'll find it in the kind of sports nutrition literature for increasing lean body mass, boosting strength and performance. It also has some anti-inflammatory activity, and it really is due to the kind of testosterone stimulating effects of it. As testosterone obviously has an opposing influence to estradiol, but we'll talk about the aromatization that can happen, especially in males that are predisposed to it, and that testosterone can be converted into estrogen. Yeah, okay, go ahead. Yeah, okay, so sterols are an alcohol group that is on the end of a backbone that would be a cholesterol molecule backbone. And then steroids are things like the anabolics. So whether they're, androstenedione or I'm not actually familiar with the common names of steroids because I don't use them, but where steroids are used, they're anabolic agents, and they're used for muscle mass, and that's essentially their main role, is to promote and produce either testosterone or conversion into DHT, again, which has another pronounced anabolic effect.
Basically, plants and cholesterol are steroids, and a lot of the adaptogen plants are sterol compounds that the body can then convert into all the various hormones. And now when someone takes steroid hormones, a synthetic steroid hormone, like cortisone, that's a steroid, right? The actual cortisone drug. Cortisol is what your body makes from cholesterol originally. And as we age, the cholesterol builds up because our bodies become less efficient at converting the sterol from cholesterol or plant products into all of the steroid hormones.
Especially with declining thyroid.
Yeah, and
thyroid hormone drives that conversion of cholesterol into all of those downstream neuroprotective steroids.
All the youth hormones. Yeah. And that's why young people don't have high cholesterol. Old people have cholesterol, high cholesterol, because their body's not as efficient at converting those sterols, namely cholesterol. Their liver doesn't convert that into the youth hormones, like progesterone, pregnenolone, DHEA, and further on down the line. I hope that answers the question. Sterol is what's found in plants, and cholesterol, and it's a precursor for steroid hormones synthesis, and sterol hormones.
Okay, so that's puncture vine leaves as a source of these saponins, namely protodiacin, and then the seeds contain furostanol saponins, and these are, as I said, mainly for libido issues and erectile dysfunction. So they are slightly lower in protodiacin compared to the leaves, but rich in furostanol and spirostanol saponins, as well as the alkaloids harmane and norharmane. I was kind of interested in both of those because Paganum harmala, or Syrian rue, is also a source of harmane and harmine, but anyway, that's a digression. So the seeds essentially then are used for erectile dysfunction and low libido. So we'll get into the way that you would treat individual person with specific defects in their endocrine regulation of the hormones that would typically be normal for a person, whether it's because they're converting testosterone into estradiol, and how you want to block that with aromatase inhibitors, or they have prostate issues, for example. That would be a different way to treat them. So for a male then with low testosterone and high aromatization, so like I said, males will produce testosterone, and most males don't have too much aromatization going on. When this testosterone is aromatized into estradiol, then gynecomastia is a classic symptom of overproduction of estradiol, and that's male breasts. So this typically happens with older males, and even if they're not beer drinkers, because beer is estrogenic, the hops that are used in the fermentation of beer, that hop is in the same family as cannabis, it's in the Cannabaceae. Both cannabis and hops are pro-estrogenic. So beer drinkers, typically not just the alcohol, but the actual hop content, will promote a male to get male breasts because of this estrogen stimulation.
In addition, the yeast that they use to ferment the
Right.
beer is also estrogenic. All yeast is estrogenic.
Right.
So even wine can have an estrogenic effect because of the high yeast content, in contrast to clear liquors, which will not have any yeast left because they're distilled.
Yeah, so you're definitely better off, and if you have any tendency towards it, not that I'm advocating you do it, but you're definitely better off drinking clear spirits than you are beers, especially beers that are IPAs, for example, that have a much higher hop content in their production. So essentially then, for a male with low testosterone who's aromatizing quite a bit of their testosterone into estradiol and they're getting gynecomastia, the treatment for this person essentially would be using nettle root as one of the main herb counterparts for this, because nettle root is an aromatase inhibitor, so it blocks the conversion of testosterone to estradiol. And then chrysin, we'll talk a little bit more about chrysin as we go through, because a lot of these testosterone stimulating or aromatization blocking herbs are potentiated with chrysin, because chrysin itself is another aromatase inhibitor, specifically from passion flower, but passion flower only contains about 1% or so of chrysin, and the dose for chrysin is so high that you'd have to consume a lot of passion flower in order to get a pharmacological dose. So,
and I just want to say that estradiol, for our listeners, there's several forms of estrogens. Estradiol is one of the most potent forms of estrogen, and that is the one that will cause in excess levels male breast development. And so when Anders says that nettle root has aromatase inhibitor compounds that block the conversion of testosterone into estradiol, that's testosterone into an estrogen type compound that will cause the male breast. So we're using the terms estrogen and estradiol interchangeably. There are other estrogens like estrone and estriol, but estradiol is the main one that has the biggest physiological effect. Nettle leaves are generally anti-inflammatory, but they are not as potent as the root in the aromatase inhibition because of the compound that's in there is not present in the leaves.
Okay, so as I said, for a male with low testosterone then and gynecomastia who wasn't drinking lots of beer, and it wasn't due to the hops and the estrogen effect from the hops, as does happen with some males who don't drink, so it's not just the hoppy beer that would do it. But for males that don't, or do rather, produce estradiol from testosterone, then nettle root would definitely be indicated as an aromatase inhibitor to prevent that conversion into estradiol. And then chrysin, as I mentioned, from passion flower, there is a product, you can get a 98% powdered product called chrysin. It's quite well known, quite available. And that would also be used in conjunction. And here's the other thing, I should probably do a discourse on chrysin because it's really not very well absorbed. I know I've mentioned before in the past using piperine or even the chili capsaicin as a potentiator of this. And I mentioned it before with turmeric root. So turmeric root has been basically compounded with either chili pepper, and that does significantly increase its bioavailability. But the same thing with chrysin. It's poorly absorbed, and orally it's really not very well absorbed. So it's formulated with something like DMSO, which would completely get past that skin barrier or that absorption lipophilically into the circulation. So chrysin with DMSO can be another very effective aromatase inhibitor that you could use in conjunction with nettle root. And then Dr. Pete always mentioned raw carrot salad, so not to underplay it. It sounds so simple, but raw carrot salad will have that estrogen removing effect from the bowel as a raw fiber. And then both vitamin E and zinc, again, would be useful in combating estrogen production from testosterone. So just to outline again, zinc, vitamin E, nettle root, chrysin with DMSO, and raw carrot would be one possible approach for this kind of patient. So let's move on. Let's move on to, let's talk about this. Okay, so, right. So,
I'll go ahead while you're gathering your thoughts there. Aromatase inhibitor drugs like letrozole for females or anastrozole for males are used to treat estrogen excess in females and males. And so it's working along the same principle as the nettle root. So a much more natural option is to use nettle root. And it is a water-soluble compound, so you can make a tea out of it, or a decoction would be better because it's hard to get stuff out of roots versus leaves can soak in boiling water, but or can soak in hot water. Nettle root can be a useful anti-estrogen for females as well as males. And you can make a decoction where you boil the root in water to drink as a tea.
Okay, so that's nettle root. It's 7:34. Okay, so if anybody wants to call in with any questions related to this month's conversation with PFAS or forever chemicals, and or wants to get into a discourse about any of these issues with testosterone, lack of production of testosterone, or decreased libido, infertility, etc. We're going to keep talking about other herbs now that have activity for treating this kind of condition. So uricoma, I think the common name is tonkat alley. So uricoma longifolia. Again, it's used in borderline or low testosterone in males. This time, rather than blocking aromatase specifically here, it's actually a prolactin modulator. So most males, it's kind of generalization, but males that have low testosterone and or gynecomastia typically have high prolactin and low LH and low FSH. So it modulates prolactin indirectly via dopamine and cortisol. Now, dopamine also has a positive effect now. We'll talk about Mucuna pruriens, or the velvet bean, a little bit later. But velvet beans used to promote dopamine has this direct action on modulating prolactin. So uricoma is also an adaptogen. And again, I've mentioned adaptogens in the past, things like withania, the ginsengs. These all have an activity in modulating stress, so they work on the cortisol ACTH pathway. So these things then reduce cortisol and stress-induced suppression of androgens, because when males are under a lot of stress, this androgen conversion can be blocked or influenced by cortisol. Tonkat alley or uricoma enhances libido, energy, fertility, and anabolic status, and it does this again by modulating prolactin and improving the presence of testosterone. Okay, so for some people, in very sensitive people, can be overstimulating those. So, it's like all things, go slow to begin with and work your way into a pharmacological dose. If you look on the internet, there's plenty of information about how much of this product you would take, depending on whether you're taking it in a concentrate that's been standardized to uric carrione, or whether or not you're using a regular tincture of it or some other form. So If you're also one of these people who's on testosterone replacement therapy, whether you're taking DHT, which is a non-aromatizable form of testosterone, or other androgens, this kind of thing needs to be looked at closely in terms of blood work and see that you're not getting out of the range with some of these things and that you're on the right path. It can mildly reduce blood glucose, so there is some caution noted for diabetics using uricoma.
And just one word about, pardon me, prolactin is a herb that is specifically good at lowering prolactin. It's called Vitex agnus castus, and that herb can be used by both males and females to regulate. In females, it can help to regulate cycles, and in male cases of excessive breast development, it can help to lower the prolactin levels.
Okay, so the next herb then, yohimbe bark. And people may have heard about yohimbine. This has always been used as a androgen stimulant, libido enhancing, herb for that type of situation and that type of condition. It's an alpha-2 adrenergic antagonist. So let's get this first caller. We're on. Take the caller. Caller, you're on the air. Where are you from? And what's your question? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Okay, can I just repeat the question here for our YouTube listeners?
Mm-hmm.
So your first question was asking about the
testosterone reduction
as the mainstream treatment for prostatic hypertrophy.
Testicular
and
cancer,
how.
I think he said.
Oh, did you say?
I think he said testicular cancer, but
Right. So wanting to bring testosterone to zero,
mm-hmm.
and right, and one of the reasons why they try to do that is because if testosterone can get converted into estradiol, like Andrew was saying earlier. So it gets converted into estrogen, and estrogen is pro-cancer. And the testosterone that's not able to get converted into estrogen is the dihydrotestosterone.
It's not available in America.
But, well, I mean, your body makes that. No, it's actually more regulated than any kind of opiate drugs and any other type of very, very powerful medicines. It's or highly regulated. But anyhow, so that is one of the reasons why you have to be careful when you're using testosterone, is because it can get converted into estrogen, and that is why they will want to treat it by getting rid of that testosterone. So it doesn't get converted into estrogen, but that's not really solving the problem. What you need to stop is that conversion instead of getting rid of the testosterone, because if you get rid of a man's testosterone, or even women have low levels too, but if you get rid of that, then your body doesn't function properly. Yes. Yeah. No, I know. I understand. It's
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, just to answer your other second question here, thanks for your call. I am biased. I'm biased towards doing the most natural thing possible and certainly organically as possible and do no harm. That's the first Hippocratic oath tenet of medicine. First, do no harm. So yeah, getting testosterone to zero for the treatment of testicular cancer to prevent aromatization, that's certainly part of the process. And then you mentioned PFAS and aluminum. Well, aluminum's been very clearly linked to dementia. I think that's very well studied, very well
And
proven.
Alzheimer's specifically.
Yeah. So dementia and Alzheimer's certainly for aluminum. So you definitely shouldn't be cooking in aluminum. I don't know what else you might be doing with it, but certainly not one of those things that's safe. And then for the whole water bottle thing, I know you didn't mention water bottles, but I was thinking just the other day the whole concept of glass. I know glass, obviously. Unfortunately, there's some glass that contains microplastics, and that's another whole can of worms. But stainless steel, I think, is probably one of those compounds that's not so dangerous, and in terms of reactivity, is fairly non-reactive. So anyway, don't drink out of aluminum containers. Don't cook in aluminum. Definitely part of dementia, Alzheimer's. Those ions are certainly taken up in the brain and do definitely interfere with signaling. So I'm just going to talk about Yohimbe bark, but let me just say it's 7:45. If anyone has any questions about this month's subject on PFAS, the forever chemicals, endocrine disruptors, we're going to get into the whole discussion and topic around the treatment of low libido, erectile dysfunction, high estrogen in males, gynecomastia, and look at these different herbs that have definitely got tons of research supporting their use in the treatment of these things, so naturally. But there's definitely caveats that I want to make people aware of. You can't just go taking lots of testosterone boosting herbs and think it's all going to be good without being aware of that potential conversion to estradiol and actually making things worse than they were to begin with. Okay, so Yohimbe bark. Just to say again, the number 707-923-3911. So it's an alpha-2 adrenergic antagonist, and it increases the sympathetic nervous system's activity and can enhance libido and erectile function. It might increase somewhat noradrenaline. It stimulates the hypothalamic pituitary gonad, or the HPG axis, indirectly. Now it does modulate prolactin then, as well as the previous herb. It does this through a dopaminergic and adrenergic mechanism. And we'll get a little bit more into the whole potential of dopamine in the treatment of prolactin and the support of testosterone production in males in a little bit. But we do have another caller. So let's take this caller. You're on the air. Where are you from? What's your question?
Our caller is from Fort Bragg. And our caller wants to talk about aluminum. Thank you. Thank you for your call. The caller was speaking about the materia medica description for homeopathic aluminum, and how if you want to look at that, it's very enlightening. I could look that up and possibly read that. I'm sorry, I'm repeating the questions because our YouTube listeners are unable to hear the callers due to some technical issues here in the studio.
Okay.
So I'll go
All
ahead and
right.
look that up and let you carry on, Andrew, and I
Yeah,
will.
so your hemibart then, it does increase slightly testosterone. It's not one of the main ones, but its main use is erectile dysfunction. Okay, so let's move on. We've talked about tribulus, we've talked about uricoma, and now the very last thing we were talking about here. Let's get on to, well, let's talk a little bit about prolactin first, and then we'll get on to Damiana. So we're going to cover Damiana. If we get time, there's lots more to do, and we'll carry on next month because we're definitely not going to get it done this month. But we're going to talk about dopamine, Mucuna pruriens, or the velvet bean, and its use, and then we'll do a little bit more about urtica radix and how its activity, and then DHT. But we're going to get a small amount of time to cover what we've got here, so let's get on with Turnera. So in the context of, okay, so for males, there's things like hypogonadism, right? So some males, and especially males that have the undescended testicle, there are some males that are born and the testes don't descend into the sac and they remain intra-abdominal or in the abdominal cavity. Some males' testicles do descend, but they just don't function very well, and they don't produce testosterone the same way that regular males' testes would. So in the profile then of hypogonadism, Turnera diffusa, I'm trying to think, Damiana, yeah, that's its common name, Damiana, has an aphrodisiac effect. So when you look at Damiana in the Materia Medica, most of its indications are going to be aphrodisiac. And this is a kind of catch-all for many different things, but let's just keep it as an aphrodisiac. To improve libido, erectile function and sexual performance. So it enhances sexual behavior. They've done animal studies, even without, and it does this in the absence of really changing testosterone very much. So it has a kind of neurotransmitter effect. So this is when we get into the kind of world of neurotransmitters rather than specifically hormone production at the end of the signal in the organ. So it likely influences dopaminergic and GABAergic systems then. And again, this may indirectly lower prolactin and enhance libido. It has mild anti-aromatase activity, a little bit like nettle root. So there is evidence to suggest that it may modulate estrogenic pathways, possibly through the flavonoid content, of which apigenin is one of the main compounds, which can have a weak aromatase inhibition activity. Now, there's no consistent direct increase seen in serum testosterone, but animal models have shown improved androgenic effects on tissues. So things like the prostate and the weight of testes, when they measure the gross weight of these in animal studies, definite increase in the tissue mass. So increased cell numbers producing increasing amounts of the same hormone. And then prolactin, its effects on prolactin. There's no strong direct data, but dopaminergic enhancement may also be plausible to support a reduction. And then talking about estrogen, the flavonoids then, like the apigenin, may contribute to estrogen metabolism or weak antagonism. So to look at the parameter of testosterone production then with Damiana, indirectly it's supported via libido and mood. And then we mentioned LH, luteinizing hormone, and FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. They're not directly stimulated, but prolactin is possibly decreased by dopamine enhancement. And then aromatization, there's a weak flavonoid mediated inhibition. And then libido and erection is strongly present for experimental support and traditional support. So its main libido is its libido enhancing effect. It's not really a specifically testosterone herb. Okay, so let me have a look at this. Look, okay, so Mucuna. Let's get into Mucuna. All right. I think we'll probably get time to do this before the end of the show, but we'll get into Mucuna pruriens, otherwise known as velvet bean, and go through all of the things that velvet bean does, specifically with its reference to dopamine and how dopamine affects this pathway. It's a tropical legume, widely used in traditional Ayurvedic medicine, and it's gained quite a lot of scientific interest due to its rich pharmacological profile, particularly as a natural source for L-DOPA. Now, most people might understand this through the use in Parkinson's patients. Parkinson's patients have dopamine deficiency, and so Mucuna has definitely been used, and there are variable results with, some Parkinson's patients don't respond to dopamine, some do, and these would be the people that would have, different. They would kind of screen these patients for deep brain stimulation or nervous stimulation. Anyway, dopamine. So velvet bean and dopamine, and how this plays into endocrine dysfunction and low libido, etc. Okay, so the alkaloids it contains then are mainly responsible, and then it contains trace amounts of tryptamines, but its dopaminergic effects are the main things that people recognize Mucuna pruriens for. DOPA crosses, or L-DOPA, the isomer form, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it's converted to dopamine by DOPA decarboxylase. As I said, it's traditionally used for Parkinson's, but it's similar to synthetic L-DOPA, but has a slow release due to all these kind of accompanying plant matrices. So like I said, I'm not a believer in isolated single chemicals. I know I've mentioned chrysin, and that is an isolated single chemical from passion flower, but if you were ever to get enough chrysin from passion flower, you would have to consume way too much. You couldn't really do it. So there are instances where single active ingredients are useful, and they got treated like certain things and substances that were specifically isolated, but if you can, the whole plant is definitely better. So there are neuroprotective effects, and this is, I think, the main reason that Parkinson's patients would benefit from this, as well as the actual presence of DOPA from signaling. So the antioxidant properties help reduce oxidative stress in the central nervous system, and the increase of superoxide dismutase and catalase are the main antioxidant triggers within that. It's an adaptogenic anti-stress compound, shown to reduce cortisol levels and improve the stress response. Again, it's used traditional medicine for male fertility, libido, and mood enhancement. But like I did say, there's anti-Parkinsonian activity is also what dopamine or L-DOPA is used for. So, the absorption of it can be bioavailable orally, and then it does cross the blood-brain barrier, obviously, via amino acid transporters, and it is metabolized primarily by DOPA decarboxylase and catechol O-methyltransferase, and is excreted through the kidneys. So for male infertility then, Mucuna pruriens improves sperm count and motility. It also has a function on stress and reduction of stress, and it's also a mild antidepressant. So that's the axis by which that particular compound can work. It's not specifically a testosterone stimulating herb, but has a more stress-related activity, and like I said, cortisol and stress hormones can definitely decrease testosterone and decrease endocrine production and neurotransmitter activity. So stress is always to be avoided, and the whole potential here of reducing cortisol with single and simple compounds that would have a direct cortisol blocking activity would be things like pregnenolone. Obviously progesterone has an activity too, but pregnenolone, being a precursor to it, is something that males could take rather than using progesterone. But anyway, it's 9:57, so let's just give you a heads up for next month. We're going to continue covering male herbs, and for different strategies, whether it's erectile dysfunction or infertility or testosterone deficiency, over aromatization with males with gynecomastia. And then we're going to discuss things like DHT that Sarah did mention, the dihydrotestosterone, which is the end point which cannot be converted into estradiol. And basically then go over the medical mistakes about benign prostatic hypertrophy and how it's treated in regular medicine, and how Dr. Pete was always an ardent advocate of progesterone and blocking estradiol, and that actually that's what you need to be looking at more importantly than the whole testosterone DHT side of things with benign prostatic hypertrophy. Okay, so it's 2 minutes to the top of the hour. My name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray. Thank you for listening.
Until the third Friday of August, wish you good night.
Good night.